as your classmate said, phosphorus never enters the atmosphere. And I like that he referenced that opening as phosphorus and phosphate, and they're kind of confusing. So I'm going to kind of reinforce what he said. Phosphorus is an essential element. It's part of CHON PS, right? So it's 96% of the human body is made up of those elements, and it's responsible for the formation of DNA, DNA, ATP, okay? So those major organic compounds. But when you think of the phosphorus cycling through the biosphere, you think of phosphate cycling through the biosphere. We're going to use up the phosphorus in that compound, but that's what generally is being cycled. So in that sense, that makes this cycle very easy because that's the only compound you have to know of the whole entire cycle versus nitrogen and carbon, which have a little bit more compounds involved. All right. So based on what he said, where do you think it's mainly stored? Based on his or their presentation, where do you think phosphate is mainly stored? Where did it start? Rocks. Good. So in the lithosphere, in rocks, and then weathering that he described as what? Break down this rock. Rain. Good. So weathering, which is rain and wind, actually will break down phosphate, and it usually will travel right into the soil or straight into water, okay? With the addition of water, it could push it towards a body of water, okay? And there could be rocks near a body of water, so it could technically fall right into the water. And I put those both there because that's important to know. Now, like they said, fertilizer is high in phosphate, so that's another way it basically goes into the land or the water through runoff, or leaching, which we're going to talk about later, which is basically penetrating through, okay, with water helping it go, because that's like a big topic. So once it's in the soil or in the water, which will end up in the soil of the water or somewhere, what's going to happen? No. Think of where it went after it was in the soil, they said. It could either have run off into the water or absorbed by plants. Good. Plants take it in, and then what happens? And then animals eat, okay? And that's called the food chain, which is our next section in the energy chapter. And then organisms after the food chain or during the food chain will always produce what? When I eat a lot of food, what do I produce? Waste, yes. Or an organism may die in that process. And then what happens? Decomposers return the phosphorus to the cycle, or the phosphate, I should say, right, to the cycle. And if you look at this picture, you see the rocks contain the phosphate. There's the rain. It breaks it up, and see how it's coming straight into a body of water, and then it'll reform rock, okay? Or it can go into the soil, which technically that's not here, and I wanted to add that arrow. Let's put it into the soil, right, because it can happen. And then it will go into the plant, and then the organism eats the plant, okay? And then this organism dies. And do you see where I tell you this is not a perfect cycle? You have arrows going everywhere? Okay. And after it dies, it could run off back into the ocean and form rock, or it can be reabsorbed by a plant. So technically this can go like this after. Again, yes? Okay. Or I should say not from the mushroom, but from the soil. So the arrows can vary. And you're never going to find a diagram that will portray it the way you're trying to explain it. You can portray it probably better. Yep, you do. So sulfur, where is it mainly found? Rocks again, in the soil, in rocks, and fossil fuels, obviously, because a rock, fossil fuels, I don't know. Think about it. That was a bad, and I'm videotaping. Fossil fuels are what? Fossils. Yeah, what are they? What fossils? What is a fossil? It's, give me the definition of a fossil. Remains of a living thing, and living things are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphate, phosphorus, and sulfur. So whenever we talk about burning of a living thing, all of these things can be released, yes? or decomposing of a living thing, or the remains of a living thing, they're gonna contain those components of matter. Now, when you burn, so every time you burn any living thing, trees, fossil fuels, you're gonna emit all of these cycles except into the atmosphere? Except for phosphorus, because it never enters the atmosphere, okay? So one thing that both groups have failed to say is whenever you burn organic matter, even I failed to say, these things are gonna go, well, I failed to say that because I only did phosphorus and it never goes into the atmosphere. So I will say it now. So it's in the soil, right? Plants take it in from the soil or from the atmosphere, and the food chain begins again, okay? So if you look at this diagram, here's my sulfate, yes? And it could go straight into the plant. And then, again, like the other one, organisms produce waste or die, and decomposers return it to the soil. So you're going to start seeing a lot of repetition. There's certain parts of the cycle that the same things always happen. How does it get into the atmosphere? I kind of just said it, and they said it. Burning fossil fuels is one of them. BFF, remember? Yes. What else? Volcanic eruptions. Oops. Biomass burning, what does that mean? It can. What else? Deforestation. Good. Not deforestation, because that's more slicing. So burning of the forest. So bio means life, and if we're burning anything that's living, and usually, even us, incineration, yes? We're going to release certain amounts of sulfur. Burning trees, I put it there. So these words are all related to biomass burning. Do you see how I kind of indented it under biomass burning? So it's a type examples of biomass burning. So they release sulfite and sulfate. And then I have to scroll down because you don't really see this, do you? I'll move this up. This is a very bad explanation, so I'm going to type it again, but we're going to get into this later. This sulfur compound, sulfite or sulfate, doesn't matter, reacts with water. So let's go with sulfate. Reacts with water to form what? Nope. Sulfuric acid. And that's going to come down, and then plants can take that in. It can go into a body of water, and obviously you're talking about a highly acidic form of sulfur, which is going to damage tree life, mainly their tissues, okay? It's going to damage sea life because you're changing the pH of the body of water. So, but we're going to get into that whole process when we do the air chapter, okay? So for now, you just have to know that it's related to acid rain. Like phosphorus, this is how it's mainly cycled, as sulfate, okay? So I'm going to start with how it goes into the atmosphere, because again, there's no starting point. So water evaporates, and what does that mean? It changes from what to what? Liquid to gas. And a type of evaporation, so I should, whoops, I can't because there's a picture, is transpiration, which is evaporation from the leaves of trees. So you could kind of put this as a little star because it's a type of evaporation. It's a star because transpiration is a form of evaporation. It's just specific to happening in the leaves of trees or leaves. It could be grass. Grass evaporates. Once we have this gas form of water, water condenses, which means it goes from gas to liquid. Good. Now this liquid is going to fall on land, or it can fall straight into a body of water. Yes? If it falls straight into the body of water, it's in the ocean or in a lake. If it falls on land, and I want you to look at this picture. Here's my rain right here, which is precipitation. And what are forms of precipitation?
Rain, snow.
Good. Rain, hail, sleet, and snow. That's the definition of precipitation, and it's water falling, again, onto either the hydrosphere or the lithosphere, the geosphere. When it falls, and what Maria was trying to say is, if it falls here and it goes this way, that's considered runoff, okay? That's considered surface runoff. If it goes into the soil, what's it going through? Infiltration. It's going into the land. If it goes through layers of the geosphere, then it's going through percolation, which is through the rocks. And so in a perfect cycle, then it would run off. And runoff always ends up where? In a large body of water. So lake or ocean, okay? So again, to reiterate, this is evaporation. If I draw an arrow coming from this tree, it's transpiration, yeah? Now it's in the atmosphere, these clouds condense, right? And then you have rain or snow, which is precipitation. And then this arrow right here is showing infiltration and percolation. I put them together, that you can't even see that word. So let me type it for you. Because they kind of go together, right? And then runoff, right here. Back into the body of water. No, and you can't see that word either. So let me add it. So runoff can go here. This red arrow could be runoff. It can also go through here and go across. So infiltrate and run off. Or it can infiltrate, percolate, and run off. Down here, though, if water is traveling, if it goes like this, and it travels here, it's actually traveling through what? Anybody know? Groundwater? It's an underground river. What's it called? Aquifer. Obviously, water is 70% of all living things, yeah? So it's going to travel. Where do we get most of our water from? Drinking, right? Or feeding off another organism provides water. Food has water. So regardless, you're going to go through the biosphere or living things in some capacity. And the same thing, we eliminate differently. So it's the one cycle that varies in terms of the food chain begins and, right?